thanks for joining us for today's presentation, The Fundamentals of Child Support. And this is where we attempt to really give an overview of the entire child support process. So here's what we're going to cover. We're going to do a little overview, talk about the value of child support, discuss who we serve and why. Then we're going to dig into the child support process. We'll then turn to preventing and managing debt and debt reduction programs. Then we'll talk a little bit about employment programs and then discuss new ways to serve our clients. So let's get started. Next slide. Now, some basic vocabulary definitions. Child support is very big on abbreviations and acronyms. So we got your CP, that's the custodial parent, the parent with whom the child spends the majority of time. It is the custodial parent who receives child support, which is paid by the NCP, the non-custodial parent, the parent who does not have the child the majority of time. Current support is the amount an NCP is required to pay regularly pursuant to a court order, a child support order issued by the support magistrate in family court. It might be $100 every week. It could be $200 every 2 weeks. And as you'll see, that's based on the NCP's income. And it's intended to be fair relative to what the NCP earns. Arrears are unpaid child support debt. That is when current support is missed. If it's $100 a week and I miss 3 weeks, then I have $300 in arrears. And DSS is the Department of Social Services. That's the parent agency of the Human Resources Administration and OCSS, the Office of Child Support Services. Now, DSS becomes a player in child support because when the child is receiving benefits, cash assistance benefits, CA, also sometimes referred to as PA, public assistance, or TANF, temporary aid to needy families. When the child is receiving benefits, then the NCP's payment goes to DSS rather than to the custodial parent. That doesn't mean the custodial parent loses out entirely. As we'll show you, the custodial parent gets a pass-through when the NCP is making payments to DSS. Next slide. Okay, we're going to start with a quick overview. Next slide. So we put children first, and we do that by helping both parents support their children. And if you think about it, that's as it should be. Whether you brought a child into this world with desire and intent, or whether the child being born is more of a surprise to one or both parents. Regardless, once the child is here, it should be both parents help support that child or children. And we do that by lower left, locating non-custodial parents if necessary, and establishing parentage, establishing child support orders, which include always a direction as to how to make sure the child has medical insurance. We then disperse payments, we monitor the payment frequency, and when necessary, we enforce the child support order. We also help NCPs find employment and manage debt. And we're going to talk about all those things in this morning's presentation. Next slide. Our current goals are to reduce child poverty. Child support is a key tool to poverty reduction for low-income families. We want to bring more services into communities. We want to build on successful partnerships across New York City. And we try to develop our policies based on research, data, and community input. We're also working right now to better serve young parents. Couple of things. Number one, please bear in mind that raising a child is a challenge. We know that under any circumstances, raising a child is challenging and expensive. It's hard. My wife and I had one child, and it was a full-time challenge for both of us. So particularly in single-parent households, raising children is a challenge and expensive. And it's also true that child support is complicated. Next slide. Child support, when it was formally established in 1975, was a cost recovery program focused on paying back government benefits. Nowadays, it's a child-focused program that recognizes the importance of both parents. And we do that in many ways by trying to help strengthen the non-custodial parents' ties to the family, help the non-custodial parent find work if necessary, and reduce debt when that becomes an issue. Next slide. Also, child support is complicated. And part of the reason it's complicated is because it's governed by many different laws and policies. Child support is federally mandated since 1975. It's state supervised and it's locally administered. So in New York City, OCSS, New York City OCSS, part of the Human Resources Administration, oversees child support cases that are located in the 5 boroughs of New York City. And some of the things we're going to talk about today, like the debt reduction programs, only apply to New York City cases. They don't apply to cases where the order is located in Suffolk County or Westchester. So federally mandated, state supervised, locally administered, and complicated. And part of our goal today is to try to clear up some of the complications and also help clear up some of the misunderstandings around child support. A lot of people have strong opinions about child support, but that may not have anything to do with the way child support is practiced here in New York City. For example, there are states, remember, state supervised, there are states where if the NCP falls behind $700-800 in child support, they get incarcerated. We don't do that in New York State. In New York State, we only pursue incarceration if there is a non-custodial parent who is willfully not paying child support. The high-rolling doctor who says, I'm not going to give that ex of mine a penny. You want to take away my driver's license? Fine, I'll hire a chauffeur. That's the person we go after for willfully refusing to pay child support. Next slide. Okay, I think this is the point where I turn the presentation over for a bit to Robert.
We're going to talk about the value of child support, why it is such an important program, such an important process for everyone to become familiar with. Next slide, please. Okay. There are many benefits to obtaining a formal child support order. First, legal paternity is established, and this benefits everyone because the child has inheritance rights, and the NCP has a say in the child's future, for example, school, medical issues, adoption, and so on. And for the CP, this is the first step in establishing an order. Next, formalized arrangements provide regular payments based on NCP income. Also, formal, documented accounting of the financial support NCPs provide. That's also an important benefit of child support. Next, collections are administratively enforced, allowing parents to focus on the child. And lastly, the cost for raising a child when there's a child support order is shared by both parents. Next slide, please. Okay. Again, just to reemphasize, child support improves outcomes for families, provides financial stability for the CPs, the NCPs. You get a voice in the child's future. You get to engage with your children without worrying about the financial issues. And also, it encourages you to find and keep employment. And for the children, there's completing school, exhibiting an increased self-control, and it improves a myriad of social indicators, right? Research finds that $1 of child support has a greater effect on how well a child does in school than other sources of income. And this is from research done by the Federal Office of Child Support Enforcement. Next slide, please. Now, as of December 2022, 204,067 children on cases with orders, and 40,424 on cases without orders, for a total of 244,491 cases. Next slide, please. Now, the last few years have brought real success. Between 2015 and 2022, we collected over $6.2 billion for New York City children. And the majority of collections do not go to OCSS. About 89% go directly to families. And on average, as of 2021, a family with a collection received about $7,142. Families on cash assistance receive less, though there is the opportunity for the pass-through payment. Next slide, please. Okay, so let's talk about who we serve with the child support program. Next slide. Our clients are diverse. We help mothers, fathers, and guardians, regardless of income or immigration status. Next slide. Also, many of our parents have low incomes. If you look at the pie chart on the left, you'll see that a total of 82% of custodial parents are currently receiving benefits or have received benefits in the past. And in the chart on the right, we see that 18% of non-custodial parents are currently receiving benefits, and 48% have received them in the past. Next slide. Because of this, we've adopted an approach that looks at outcomes for 2 generations. We help children receive the support they need, and we also work with parents to reduce financial stress and to connect them to services, most importantly. Our goal is to help break the cycle of poverty across 2 generations. And the bottom line is that child support can improve child welfare. Next slide. The last few years have brought real success. Between 2015 and 2021, we collected over $5.5 billion for New York City children, and on average, a family in 2023 collected $7,903. Next slide. Now that we've looked at the overview of child support, let's take a look at the process. Next slide. The process begins with an opening of a case, followed by parentage being established. Then the child support order being established by the court. Once the order is established, we can begin collecting and distributing support, which can then be followed by enforcing the order and or modifying it. Next slide. Custodial parents receiving cash assistance receive a mandatory referral to our borough offices, and borough offices are currently conducting interviews via the phone. In all other cases, the parties will fill out a child support application. They can come to our family court locations on their own or access the child support mobile app to begin the process. An OCSS caseworker works one-on-one with the custodial parent to complete the child support application. Next slide, please. Now, parentage can be established in one of the following ways, right? Through marriage, or it can be settled in court in a number of ways. First, an acknowledgement of parentage, also known as the AOP, that is signed in the hospital or the OCSS office, or verbal acknowledgement or DNA testing. And it is important to establish parentage because establishing paternity brings social benefits to the child and works towards building a father-child relationship that lasts a lifetime. Parentage also preserves inheritance rights and legally grants the child access to key benefits such as Veterans Administration benefits, Social Security Administration benefits, supplemental security income benefits, and death benefits. And it also gives fathers a voice in court-ordered visitation, custody, or adoption rights. No order can be made if parentage is still in question, right? Parentage is always the very first step. Now, the fee for DNA testing to establish parentage or paternity is $40 per person, which can be waived for cash assistance clients and under other extenuating circumstances. Next slide. Again, parentage. There, all of these things that we talked about. Parentage provides establishing parentage provides many advantages to the couples in the child support process. All right, establishing paternity brings social benefits to the child and works towards building that father-child relationship. Parentage preserves inheritance rights. Parentage gives fathers a voice in court-ordered visitation, custody, or adoption rights. And again, just to reiterate, parentage can be established in one of the following ways: marriage, acknowledgement of paternity, or settled through the courts through verbal acknowledgement or DNA testing. Next slide. Now, in terms of the process for the custodial parent, the custodial parent provides OCSS with information about the non-custodial parent and receives screening for domestic violence. OCSS attempts to locate the NCP using state and federal databases and may potentially contact the NCP's employer. And if OCSS is unable to locate the NCP, the case is on hold while we search. If the NCP is located, a petition is filed for parentage and/or support, a summons is sent to the NCP, and an appearance notice is mailed to the CP. A court date is typically established for 4 to 5 weeks after a petition is filed, and both parties may return to court one or more times if necessary to complete the documentation or establish parentage. Next, the court then determines the support amount, and the CP receives the child support order. Now, since the pandemic, there's been a delay in court processing, and the New York City Family Court conducts proceedings in person, by telephone, and via video conference. Next slide. Now, in terms of the NCP process, The NCP process begins with the NCP receiving a summons package in the mail. For cash assistance cases, the NCP is served the initial summons by mail. If the NCP does not appear, the sheriff serves a personal summons. For non-CA cases, the CP is responsible for serving the summons. Next, the NCP and CP attend the hearing in family court. If the NCP doesn't appear, the sheriff will serve the summons. And it is important to note that the NCP needs to bring financial documentation to court so that the support amount can be established based on what is provided. The NCP might return to court one or more times if necessary to complete the documentation to establish parentage. Next, the NCP then receives the child support order once it is established. So in terms of default orders, if the NCP does not appear in court, then a default order can be issued without input from him or her. Now, if employed, the NCP typically begins to have their child support automatically deducted from their paychecks. And payments are usually deducted after 2 to 3 pay cycles. So the NCP will be required to make payments themselves before that, to avoid accruing debt. Next slide. And what determines the payment amount largely is the Child Support Standards Act, CSSA. And CSSA is a New York state law that provides guidelines for determining the amount of the child support obligation. And a simplistic breakdown is that one child is 17% gross income, 2 children 25%, 3 children 29%, 4 31%, and 5 or more at least 35%. Next slide.
So the pass-through, as we said earlier, if the family, and particularly it's the children in the family, are not receiving a benefit, then 100% of support payments and 100% of any debt payments go directly to the custodial parent. For families that are receiving a benefit, the family receives the cash assistance benefit, as well as a pass-through if child support is being paid. And that can go up to $100 if there's one child on the case, and the monthly payment is $100 or more, or it can be up to $200 if there are 2 or more children on the case. So even though some of the money goes to DSS to repay the cost of the cash assistance benefits, there's a pass-through to the custodial parent above and beyond the amount that's in the cash assistance budget. And that pass-through can be $100, up to $100 for one child, up to $200 for 2 or more children, provided the child support payments are being made by the NCP. Next slide. Now, there are 2 ways now to establish or modify an order. One of those is the traditional court process, which we outlined earlier. A petition is sent to family court to either establish paternity and support or just for support. And then a summons is sent to the non-custodial parent, and the both parties appear in family court. I should add that family court has different parts. The part that determines custody of children is separate from child support. Child support is handled by the support magistrate, and you can go to family court for a child support hearing without needing to have a lawyer. It's what we call a pro se court, which means the CP and the NCP can appear and represent themselves. That's the traditional process as it's always been in New York State. And as Robert mentioned earlier, um, uh, that can require several visits. And it now is a bit delayed because of the pandemic. The court appearance may be virtual. So there have been some changes because of the pandemic. But the major change from the pandemic is that we now also try to facilitate agreements through our customer service office, where the parents separately or together go over the amount of child support that will be paid, which is determined the same way it's done in court by the by applying the Child Support Standards Act. And the agreement is drawn up. It's reviewed by an HRA lawyer to make sure it's correct. And then the parents still have to go to family court to have the judge question them and make sure, did you enter into this of your own will? Is it, do you understand the agreement? If so, then I'm going to order this agreement to become the child support order. You can also modify your order through the same two processes. If the NCP loses his or her job or has their hours cut, that would justify a downward modification. If the NCP has gotten a new job or a promotion, that could result in an upward modification. And over the length of a child support case, which can go on for a long time, the age of emancipation, as we'll talk about in a moment, in New York State is 21. So if a child support case starts when the child is 2, we're going to have a 19-year relationship with the CP and the NCP, and it's quite likely that the order will be modified several times during that 19-year period. Next slide. The agreement process, as I mentioned earlier, the parents and OCSS fill out the agreement. It's sent to court. After it's been reviewed, a hearing is scheduled. The parents then go to family court, either physically or virtually, usually for just one hearing. And another big benefit to this approach is they go to court already knowing what the result's going to be, because I've sat through child support hearings in family court, and they move very quickly. And a lot of times the parents aren't really clear, hey, what just happened? Whereas if you choose the agreement process, you can go through it with our customer service staff. You have a chance to ask questions and get answers. And then either way, the child support order is filed and a case is opened by OCSS. Next slide. Benefit to the agreements. It should shorten the time in court. It should align orders with the NCP's income. It provides, as I said, the opportunity to ask questions. It's a more supportive process. It can foster open discussions between the parents and hopefully decrease the number of default orders because everybody's there and participating. Next slide. Now, whether it's an agreement or the traditional court process, it's very important that the NCP participate from day one. If the NCP participates, the child support order will be aligned with income. If the NCP's income falls below the federal poverty line or the New York State self-support reserve, there are protections in place. We'll look at those in a minute. Above the self-support reserve, that's when the Child Support Standards Act kicks in, and it's a percentage of income. Either way, ideally, the NCP pays on time and in full, leading to better outcomes for the children. Next slide. Let's dive into those protections. For NCPs earning at or below the federal poverty line, which is what? Well, in the lower right corner, we see that the federal poverty level, which is adjusted annually for 2024, is $15,060. That's for one person household. For NCPs earning at or below the federal poverty level, the order can be $25 a month or less, and a $500 cap on arrears owed to DSS. Minimum orders earning at or below the self-support reserve, $50 a month. Earning above the self-support reserve, that's when the Child Support Standards Act kicks in. So protections are in place for low-income NCPs if they show up and provide proof of their income. So, for example, the NCP who may find himself or herself incarcerated, when you are doing time upstate, you are definitely earning less than the federal poverty level, making snow fence or filing cabinets or license plates for Corecraft. So that should enable the NCP to file for a downward modification to a poverty level order. Next slide. Okay. Earlier, we showed you the roughly $750 million that OCSS takes in each year. Where does that come from? Well, no surprise here. 3/4 of it comes from withholding from wages. That is to say, garnishing paychecks. We call it IWO, an income withholding order. Other sources include direct payments made by the NCP who's self-employed, other enforcement actions. You can see we also take funds from tax refunds, IRS tax offset, state tax offset, and unemployment benefits also are subject to withholding. But the bulk of 3/4 of what we bring in each year comes from withholding of wages. Next slide. What is withheld from income? Well, the obligation amount pursuant to the court order, and possibly an add amount if there are arrears. And the add amount can be 50% of the court-ordered obligation. If there are no arrears, then there's no add amount. So, for example, if the obligation amount is $100 a month and there's $600 of arrears, then for a period of time, the amount withheld from income will not be $100, it will be $150. The $100 obligation amount plus a $50 add amount for a total withholding of $150. In this example, if the NCP makes regular payments, the add amount will be part of the order for 12 months. 12 times 50 equals 600. When the $600 in arrears is reduced and done away with, then the $150 IWO amount will revert back to the simple $100 obligation amount. Next slide. See, I told you child support's complicated. Now, Let's talk a little bit about enforcement actions. Um, there are two basic kinds, administrative and judicial. The administrative actions start automatically. When you fall behind by so many months, and different um, uh, enforcement actions have different time amounts. Um, when you fall behind by 2 months, for example, we can report you to credit agencies. We can also freeze your bank account. When you fall behind by 4 months, we can make it impossible for you to get a passport. We can suspend your driver license. It's all done by the child support database. The NCP, rather the custodial parent, doesn't have to do anything. For any enforcement action, the NCP is notified by mail that it's coming, and can challenge. Maybe we've got the wrong person. Maybe there's a mistake somewhere. Always due process allows people to challenge an administrative enforcement action. As I said, the CP doesn't have to take any action. These start automatically by OCSS. There are also judicial actions that OCSS starts only when administrative enforcement is unsuccessful and there's no alternative but court. However, a violation petition can also be filed by the custodial parent, who does not have to wait for our administrative enforcement. Next slide. Some administrative enforcement actions, as I've already mentioned, include reporting to credit agencies, freezing bank accounts and then taking those funds. And that can include CDs, brokerage accounts, all kinds of liquid accounts. We can intercept your tax refund. We can suspend your driver license. And we can also seize your lottery prize. There are other enforcement actions that aren't listed here. There are about a dozen of them in total. Low-income NCPs are excluded from some actions. By the way, we do have an entire webinar that we just held a few weeks ago, and we'll be holding again in early 2025 on administrative enforcement actions, where we go through every administrative enforcement action and also discuss the exclusions that apply to some actions for low-income NCPs. Next slide. Judicial enforcement actions can include a money judgment. You have been determined by the judge to owe $5,000 in child support. Bad news, that comes with a 9% annual interest charge. We can order you to take a work program. We can suspend your doctor license or your law license. We can, if we think that avoiding child support is willful, we can issue a warrant for your arrest that can lead to probation or incarceration. Next slide. Now, as I mentioned earlier, there's always a right to challenge an enforcement. Due process requires the NCP has the right to challenge all enforcement actions, and we'll uphold the challenge if there's a mistake of fact. Maybe you're John Smith and we got the wrong John Smith. You don't even have a child support case. Or maybe you're exempt for some reason that we didn't know about. The timeframes to challenge an enforcement action depend on the various action. Again, a lot of these are spelled out in different laws and provisions. Regardless of the time frame, we will review the case and determine if the challenge should be upheld or denied. And we'll send a notice to the NCP letting them know what our decision is with regard to the challenge. Next slide. Now, as I mentioned earlier, the age of emancipation in New York State is 21. There are states where it's 17 or 18. New York State, it's 21 unless one of the parties petitions the court to terminate the order because the parents reconcile, or perhaps the child moves in with the NCP. Not so unusual for teenagers to say, hey, I'm sick of living with you. I want to go live with my other parent. In which case, it may be that the roles get reversed, that the existing child support case should be terminated, and a new case should be opened where the former CP now becomes the NCP. Cases can also terminate when the child joins the military, gets married, becomes a YouTube sensation or an influencer at age 17 and becomes fully independent, or unthinkable, passes away. For any of those conditions, filing a petition is necessary for us to know of the circumstances and to make the right decision as to whether or not to terminate the order. Now, I did see a question go by in chat with regard to, can child support be extended beyond the age of 21? And the answer to that is yes. It can be extended for 2 years if the child is going to college, if the court is notified before the child is 20 and a half. You got to give us a little running start on this. So child support can be extended for 2 years if the child goes to college, and it can be extended for longer periods of time if the adult child is severely disabled and unable to become fully independent. Okay, next slide. So, as I noted earlier, if the child who is paying child support now has custody of the child or children, they must petition the court immediately. We don't have a crystal ball. We're not aware when custody changes unless we're informed by a parent or guardian. Existing child support orders are not modified until a petition is filed with the court. So if there's been a change, then it's on you to let us know. Next slide.
Enforcement actions can happen, but issues with debt typically occur from the very beginning. So let's now talk about how enforcement actions can be prevented and how to manage child support debt. Next slide. Okay. Issues typically begin because first, an NCP fails to appear at their court hearing and a default order is issued, and or the NCP does not notify or return to the court when they experience a change in their circumstances or appear in court when requested. Now, this is where you, as community partners, can communicate that it's in the NCP's best interest to continually engage with the process. And one important way they can do that is to modify their order when their financial circumstances change. Next slide. Now, either party can file a petition in court to modify an order upward or downward. Circumstances for modification can include a new, higher paying job or a raise at an existing position, a job loss or a decrease in income. There's incarceration, right, applying to orders after October 13th, 2010. Also, sudden disability, be that a temporary or permanent disability. And finally, a change in custody. Next slide. While the courts have been closed, we've worked hard to offer an alternative way for parents to modify existing support orders virtually. MOTS, Modified Orders Through Child Support, offers parents, that's CPs and NCPs, the opportunity to work with an OCSS customer service representative to discuss and come to an agreement on changing an existing child support order using the child support guidelines, the standard child support guidelines, I should say, and calculations. So the process, right? It starts with OCSS customer service staff who speaks by phone to the non-custodial and or custodial parent to draft an agreement and obtain supporting documents. Next, the Office of Legal Affairs reviews the signed agreement, documents, and petition. Then the approved stipulation package is filed in court for a hearing to be scheduled. Typically, only one court appearance is required for an order on consent. Now, the benefits are that it would shorten the time spent in court. One, it aligns with the orders. It aligns orders, with the NCP's income. It gives the CP and NCP the opportunity to ask questions. It's a more supportive process. Also, it allows for open discussions between parents. And finally, and very importantly, it decreases orders made on default. Next slide. Now, for assistance with modifying an order, an NCP or CP can call customer service at the New York State Child Support Helpline or visit the New York State Family Court. And some of that information, as you can see, is contained on the slides. Now, we acknowledge that you're all probably aware of the negative impact of debt, and we too recognize and understand it as well. So let's talk about the impact of child support debt on families. Multiple studies show that debt in general has a negative impact on one's mental and physical health and causes stress for families. Overwhelming child support debt can lead to non-payment of current obligation amounts, as well as conflict between custodial and non-custodial parents, potentially less contact with children, and less income for low-income custodial families. All very serious negative effects. Next slide. So our solution, our two-pronged approach to debt is as such. Programs designed to head off new debt or to help with debt reduction are part of OCSS's mission. So our two-pronged approach involves, one, early intervention for newer cases. We want to prevent the accumulation of arrears in the first place. Plus, secondly, ongoing intervention for cases that have established arrears. We believe that most non-custodial parents want to support their children, but need support themselves to do so. And we believe these two factors contribute to reduced debt that leads to better outcomes for children. We know from experience that reducing debt leads to increased child support payments, and that's when children benefit. We've seen that reducing debt works for families. Next slide.
The programs we're going to talk about now exist only for cases based in the city of New York. Remember, federally mandated, state supervised, locally administered. If your case is in Suffolk County or somewhere upstate, Wyoming County, or it's an interstate case, chances are these programs don't apply to you. Let's take a look. Next slide. Now, for money owed to the Department of Social Services, that is to say, child support that should have been paid while the child was receiving benefits, we have a lot of programs: arrears cap, arrears credit, pay it off, parent success program. Going to talk about each of those. You can learn more about these at nyc.gov/OCSS debt reduction. When we send you this deck this week, these links will be clickable. So you can scroll through the deck, find this if you want to learn more, and click on OCSS debt reduction. Money owed to the custodial parent, we don't have so many tools. All we can do is offer mediation, and we'll talk about that. Next slide. Arrears caps arrears at $500 during the period that an NCP earns at or below the federal poverty level. 5 years upstate, incarcerated, all that, if we kept billing you as if you were still out on the street and you racked up $15,000 in debt, if it's owed to DSS, we can reduce that from $15,000 to $500. Eligibility for the program: the debt is permanently owed to DSS, and the debt was accrued while the child on the order was receiving cash assistance, and the NCP's income was at or below the federal poverty level. Okay, so that's arrears cap. Next up, we have arrears credit. Arrears credit is a $5,000 annual credit on debt permanently owed to DSS when child support is paid regularly for a full year, and NCPs can participate for 3 years, receiving up to $15,000 in arrears credit. Again, to be eligible, the debt's got to be permanently owed to DSS. Current child support orders have to be fully paid each month for the entire year, whether that payment is currently going to DSS or it's going to the custodial parent. If there's no current order, the amount on the last child support order is fully paid each month for a year. Payments go toward the debt owed. Now, the thing that's cool about this is you can combine these programs. You've got a high order, you've got a lesser job now because of the pandemic. So the first thing you do is you get your high order of $300 every 2 weeks, reduced to a lower level, $100 every 2 weeks. Then you make those payments, those $100 payments for a year, and boom, you get a $5,000 arrears credit for money permanently owed to DSS. Next slide. Pay It Off is a DSS arrears payment matching program that we offer each year during a limited time period. The time period for 2024 was in March 1 to 15, so it's already passed, but it will be coming up in 2025, and I think it's going to be March again. Eligibility: debt that's permanently owed to DSS, and if there's a minimum monthly child support, that must also be made during the month. Next slide. Pay It Off. It requires making a payment of $500 or more, and we will double your payment up to the amount that you owe. Next slide. By the way, we have a whole program on debt reduction that goes deeper into all these programs that we'll be offering in a few months. The Parent Success Program is designed to support an NCP's well-being and strengthen their ability to provide for their children. In phase 1, up to $10,000 in debt can be eliminated after the NCP completes an approved substance use treatment program. As with all the other programs, this requires the debt being permanently owed to DSS and completing an approved program. Next slide. These programs work. Arrears cap: it's reduced $284 million since 2009, helped over 13,000 NCPs. Arrears credit: $87 million since 2011. It's helped over 5,000 NCPs. Pay It Off: reduced $19 million, helped over 4,000 NCPs. So these programs work. Again, they're only available in New York City. Next slide. And there's a lot of debt out there. $804 million is owed to DSS, and 3 times that, $2.7 billion is owed to the custodial parent. Now, I mentioned earlier that we don't have so many tools with money owed to the custodial parent. And if you think about it, that's appropriate. We can't say to Mr. Jones, "Oh, you have a child support case with Miss Smith and you owe her $60,000. Well, we're going to forgive that." We can't do that because the money's not owed to us. It's not owed to the government. It's owed to Miss Smith. So mediation is the approach that we have. Next slide. And mediation services can address child support debt as well as other topics. Mediators, and we have a list, and I'll send the list of approved mediators out to everyone along with today's presentation. Mediators help parents come to agreements about past due child support, future child support, custody or visitation, communication, or other types of conflicts. Now, realistically, because we've talked to loads of CPs and NCPs, we know there are some NCP CP relationships that are toxic, where mediation is not going to work. But for parents who have the opportunity to communicate with each other and who can put some of their differences aside to focus on the best interests of the child, the chance to work things out. Look, Ms. Smith, you know your ex, Mr. Jones, is never going to be able to pay you the $60,000 he owes you. And he owes so much that he's overwhelmed. He's not even going to try. But if he were able to pay you $1,000 every other month for 2 years, totaling $12,000, would you forgive the other debt? Well, that might be something Ms. Smith might consider. Half a loaf is better than none. Maybe there are visitation issues that can be ironed out that are part of what makes the relationship toxic. Maybe Mr. Smith always calls late at night after he's had a beer or two, and Miss Jones would prefer that Mr. Smith communicate via email, because I don't want calls in the middle of the night. I just put the kids to bed. I'm tired. Oh, I didn't realize that. I'll do that. So mediation can address multiple issues, including past due child support payments. Generally, the parties attend, not their attorneys. Sometimes the person conducting the mediation may indeed be an attorney, but they are trained in helping resolve conflict and also making sure that it's an above board arrangement and that there's no threat of one party saying to the other, you go along with my proposal for mediation. Otherwise, I'll catch up with you afterwards and you're going to regret it. Mediators are trained to recognize scenarios such as that and will not pursue that kind of mediation. Next slide. Employment programs. We're going to run through these quickly. Next slide. So we have job placement programs within the parent support program, pathways to industrial and construction careers called PINC, Text to Work, Jobs Plus. Text to Work is a citywide program. Jobs Plus is for NYCHA residents, Workforce One. We have job training with multiple vendors in green jobs, construction, IT, transportation, and healthcare. You can learn more by clicking at the link in the upper right, on.nyc.gov/OCSS-jobs. And again, you'll be able to do that off of the deck when we send it to you. Next slide. Parent support programs, a problem-solving court approach to connecting NCPs to employment services and other programs to reduce barriers to paying child support. It connects NCPs to employment, job training, mediation, education, and much more. Next slide. Text to Work, information about new job openings directly to job seekers' cell phones. Just text the word jobs to 877-877 to receive job alerts. Next slide. As I mentioned already, Jobs Plus is an employment program for New York City public housing NYCHA residents. It offers assessments, job readiness training, job search assistance, referrals for social support, and child support navigation assistance. If you live in a NYCHA housing, then that is something that you should consider learning more about. Next slide. Workforce One, Virtual Career Center, no charge. System helps New Yorkers prepare for and connect to jobs in every sector across the 5 boroughs. Parents can get help via web or phone with free training, identifying jobs for their skills, and preparing for interviews. Next slide. So, building on our successes for custodial parents. We want to add more custodial parents to our program. We look at census data and we know there are low-income CPs out there who are not participating in child support. And we know that regular and consistent child support income can help get them out of poverty. We want to close the gap between the number of low-income single-parent families who can benefit from our services and those on our caseload. Next. We want to better engage non-custodial parents so they have orders they can afford to pay and avoid the accumulation of debt. And we encourage the use of agreements and mediation services where possible in order to simplify the child support process and provide a more supportive experience to the CP and NCP. Next. And building on our successes, we want to make it easier for NCPs and CPs to contact us by email, phone, and in person. Pre-pandemic, you had to come in to West Broad, Lower Manhattan, and the customer service walk-in center. Now you can make a phone appointment. You can contact us by email. So we have virtual customer service appointments, and we're texting parents to remind them about their appointments and inform them about programs that are relevant to their case, including these webinars. Next slide.
I'm going to bring us home and talk about all of the technological tools that OCSS has in place to help serve our clients. Next slide. There is a new mobile app which simplifies child support. It's called the New York City Child Support Access HRA mobile app. And the mobile app can streamline multiple processes: applying for child support, submitting forms for an enforcement challenge, making an online credit, debit, PayPal, or Venmo payment with no fee, or retaining payment information, right? Privacy. Also, and applying for debt reduction and the MOTS program. The app is available in a variety of languages, and you can download it or use the QR code on the screen. Okay, next slide. The benefits for custodial parents includes it streamlines the enrollment process by allowing participants to enroll in child support and submit the forms right from their phone. They can also update contact information, and custodial parents receiving cash assistance can receive notices and appointment reminders. Now, the benefits for NCP, oh, sorry, next slide. Sorry. The benefits for NCPs include the ability to submit forms to challenge multiple enforcement actions, a driver or professional license suspension, the ad amount, passport denial, interception of a tax refund, freezing of a bank account, and liens against assets or personal property. Also, you can update contact information. Parents whose driver's licenses were suspended can also access the forms needed to enter into a payment agreement. Next slide. Oh, okay. As a services provider, you are uniquely positioned to identify family members in need of child support services. Your members trust the information, resources, and guidance that you give them. The child support snapshot allows you to continue providing trusted guidance about their child support case. So, what is Snapshot? Snapshot is an online tool that puts important child support information and resources in the hands of service providers outside of New York City's OCSS. It's also access to child support applications, forms, brochures, and videos. And also, Snapshot provides information and next steps without needing to be a child support expert. Next slide. We've improved our outreach by creating videos on YouTube that teach our families how to better engage in the child support process. These include videos on how to challenge an enforcement action, understanding your court order, or how to prepare for court. We've reorganized our website to be more user-friendly. And we're conducting appointments over the phone to better serve our clients. We're working to communicate our program's offerings to our families where they are and in ways that are meaningful for them. Next slide. Okay, I mentioned, yes, that we do, in fact, create YouTube videos and various YouTube channels, and the types of products that are included there are explainer videos, right? How-to videos, informational videos, and information for employers. And you see some samples of that on the right side of the screen. Next slide. So if you're looking for legal help in New York City, Family Legal Care offers free legal information and advice on New York family law and family court procedure. In New York State, many families are navigating the family court process without a lawyer, and Family Legal Care can help. And I would make a special note to point out the URL, familylegalcare.org. Right? And so you get legal consultations with an attorney via video chat or phone. And also they have tech hubs that can provide computers and internet. And you see the number there to call for appointments. Next slide. OCSS customer service can help you with general questions about the child support program, specific questions about your child support case, applying for child support, payments and obligations, modifying an order, changing an address, also questions about enforcement measures or relief from an administrative enforcement action, also debt reduction programs and employment programs, office locations, parentage, and more. Next slide, please. Okay, listed here, you see several important resources for OCSS, so child support information. All right, the city OCSS, New York State Child Support. All right, the OCSS playlist on YouTube. Right, how to request a phone appointment again, and the library of videos is still evolving and growing. Right, resources such as managing debt, community partners packets, handbooks for CPs and NCPs. You see here the email to contact OCSS customer services, also the state child support helpline. And for those, if you want to enroll today, you can download the New York City Child Support Access HRA mobile app, or go to the state child support website at nyc.gov/child support mobile.